We're lucky enough to be going away on holiday for a week very shortly, so it is time for me to think about what sort of journal I want to take with me, because when I'm away I love to sketch to capture what I see. So please join me as I decide what size I want to take. I am going to make it, so I'll show you how I do that, whether I want to have pockets, what sort of paper, how I'm going to decorate it, and all that sort of stuff. My name's Liz Chaderton. I'm a watercolour artist based in Berkshire. Every week I share tips and tricks that I wish I'd known about ages ago. And this week it's how to prepare the perfect travel journal. So what makes a perfect travel journal? This is a little moleskin book that I have used for sort of urban sketching and little experiments and, oh look, Ilfracombe when we've been away, down in Kent. So I've used it for all sorts of things. It's not very thick paper, but it's enough for line and wash, and that's what I tend to use when I'm travelling. But as you can see, it's gone from Lewis Castle, there was an Amsterdam, an Ilfracombe, all sorts of there. I actually quite like finishing a journal in the time we're away, and we're away for a week, so this is way too long. What is good about it is it's got a pocket at the back, so I think I might incorporate that in my perfect journal. And you can work on both sides of the paper without it bleeding through. So I want to make sure the paper I use has that property as well. And it is a handy size to fit in your rucksack, your day sack, or your handbag or whatever. And it has got a closure. So I think I'm looking for a week-long journal with a closure, with a pocket, about that size. This is another possibility. Look at this. So it comes in a little case pocket book, but it is craft paper. This is from Sea White and it is a concertina sketchbook. So I haven't used this before, but I saw it and could not resist. All the pages are stuck together, but they are double. Can you see that? Just to give it an extra stability. I am tempted to take this. It's too long for a week again, but because it's tinted paper, it would make me work in a different way. The trouble is I would need to take opaque things with me, and I've already said line and wash is how I tend to work when I'm away, simply because it's very portable. Literally, you need a pen, a water brush, and a little bit of watercolour. I'd have to take either acrylic markers or some sort of opaque paint with this. So that's probably not ideal if we're travelling fairly light. This is another commercial one. This was from Etcher. I don't know if you can just see the little llama there. And I took this when we did a big long trip to Hawaii and Australia, which was amazing. So again, the size is good. I ran out because I did, so I had to find extra pieces of paper and stick it in the back. It's got a pocket, it's got an enclosure. I do like the fact that you could decorate the front cover. So I want to incorporate some of those ideas. The paper in this sort of wasn't terribly bright and didn't really let the watercolours shine, which we were in, tropical, bright sunshine, and the colours do not sing. So the paper you put in it is really important as well. Let me grab a homemade book. So this was a week down in Devon, and it is a concertina sketchbook that I made that worked really well. This was a good length for the week. I think I had one spare page, so I stuck a quick postcard in there. And that was a pretty good length. So what are we talking? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, about 24 pages. And I quite like the format again. So it is a portrait format, but you can work on one page or like here across 2, or indeed you could do more. It has got an enclosure I put on it, and it's quite pretty. I didn't put a pocket on that one. Do like Devon, so here's one, did pop a pocket on the front. Again, concertina. And this one's actually got pockets inside, which I don't like, so that's not where I'm going. This is a very recent one I made. Pocket on the front, which is handy. Square. The paper worked on well on this. And, you know, you can work portrait or landscape. You know, it's yours. Do what you like. Final one here, just to show you, is again back to that sort of portrait size, pocket in the front. This is, I think, just for heavyweight drawing paper, and that stood up to what I was doing. This was a hiking holiday, so it was quite limited, but that worked pretty well. And I said it was final, but actually this is final. Now again, this was a really long trip. This was a 3-week trip, so to Costa Rica and Mexico. So it was a far longer book because I knew I needed to have plenty of space. I did not make it well. Can you see it's all falling to pieces? Look, I had to mend it halfway through. So I do need to make sure it is firmly stuck together this time. But I look at this and it does give me such lovely memories of the trip. On this one, I actually stuck the back pages together to form a pocket, which has got all sorts of things in, from, look, agave, thorns to leaflets to bits and bobs. For me, the perfect sketchbook is going to be about 8 by 5 inches. Needs to be able to take watercolour and not to be too absorbent. I want a closure, I want a pocket, I want some decoration. Length, we reckon about 24 pages. Your definition of perfect is going to be different from mine, but just looking through maybe some old sketchbooks and thinking how you're going to use it will help you get close to it. And making your perfect sketchbook doesn't actually take an awful lot. Let's think. We need something for the cover. This, I think, is the back of an old sketchbook that I've saved, something nice and firm, so that when I'm out and about sketching, I've got something to rest on. So you need a ruler, a sharp knife, a pair of scissors maybe, some glue and a brush. I've got a cutting mat. If you haven't got a cutting mat, just something to protect your table. Bit of ribbon or elastic or something that we can use for our enclosure, because we said we wanted that. I've ripped out some pages from a very old atlas, so of where we're going to, because we're luckily going to Barbados. So I thought it would be fun to have the map on there. And I've ripped out a bit of the index that actually has got Bridgetown on it, capital of Barbados, that I can use for the pocket. So that's all the covers. And then I have got, and it's way too big to show, is a sheet of watercolour paper. So it is a knot surface and it's £140 or 300 grams per square metre. Let's just measure, because I don't like wasting paper. So this is 61 centimetres long, which is 24 inches, and it is 34 inches wide, which is 86. And of course, the first tip is measure twice, cut once. I'm just going to work in inches today, only because it works out perfectly. I want it 8 inches wide. This is 24. So that will be, if I cut this into 3 strips, that will be the perfect size. Now, I do not like to waste paper. If I do it, 5 inches wide, we've said this is 34, I'm going to have 4 inches left over. So I might make it slightly fatter. Yeah, about 5.5 inches wide each page. You do need to have a little flap at the end so we can stick it all together. But I think that will be good. Let's mark 8 and 16. 8, 16. If you have a super fancy guillotine or paper cutter, I'm envious. I only have a small one that isn't terribly good, so I'm going to cut this by hand. If you're only going to draw in your book or only use, say, pen, you draw either with pencil, so dry media, or just use an ink pen and no watercolour, you won't need to use watercolour paper. If you're going to do very detailed work, you might want a smooth paper. Looser work, you might want a paper with a little bit more of a texture. So it's really important to think what you want to do, you know, what your favourite way of working is, and make sure your paper is good. You know, if you're collaging, want to stick lots of tickets and receipts and all those things in, then you want it to be more substantial, to stand up to a bit of glue. And you might go for, say, a mixed media paper. I'm not a perfectionist, and this is going to get battered around while I'm on holiday. But I do want it to be roughly presentable. If you're fond of a deckled edge, you could rip this and you'd get that sort of torn edge look. And we've got 3 strips of paper now. We need to stick these all together so it's in a continuous strip. And the way I like to do that is learn from my mistakes. That one that fell to pieces, I just taped the papers together. This one I am going to overlap. I need to fold in, say, I'm going to go for 1.5 centimetres. Sorry, I do, which is what, about 3/4 of an inch. I do swap between measurements, inches and centimetres, brought up with both of them. Doesn't really matter, but I guess you should probably stick with one. Right, I've got a little bone folder. If you haven't got one of these, just use maybe the edge of a pair of scissors and you can just score a line and then fold it. Just helps you fold it nice and neatly. And that is going to be a little flap for sticking our paper together. And I am going to do that equally on all these 3 pieces of paper. If you've cut yours into 4 strips, obviously do it on all 4. We're just going to fold that over. On your final one, you actually are going to cut off 1.5 centimetres because there's nothing to stick it to. So whatever your little fold over is, on your final trim it off. What I now need to do is stick these together. So I've got my little fold there, and I will stick that together with my glue so that I have a huge long strip. I've just got PVA glue here. If you've got something a bit smarter, sort of bookbinder's glue, well, that's lovely. You could use just a glue stick, but you do want to learn from that mistake that I made before and make sure that this is well stuck. And I'm just gluing over that little flap that we folded in. We just overlap those. And in my case, realised that my measurements weren't perfect. And we just press that down firmly with your thumb, or you could use your bone folder and we have stuck two pieces of paper together. And then I need to do exactly the same here. Obviously, we're trying to avoid getting any glue on to the paper. Aren't I lucky having such a long table? Then get your super handy books and just weight it down while it dries. So here's my massively long piece of paper. And I was just thinking, of course, if you've not got a lovely long table to work on, it's better to fold your bits up and then stick them all together. Just because I've got this, then I've got a nice sort of vision of where I'm going. Each section of this is going to be folded into 6 because that's my measurements. So we've already got this fold, that's where I stuck it. So I'm going to start by folding it in half, and again being as accurate as possible, using my fingers to press that fold. Because it's against the grain of the paper, it's not very happy. So then I will either use my bone folder to get a nice crisp fold, or actually the ends of a pair of scissors is a really good way of doing that. So if we do that, it will just make the whole thing a little bit more manageable. Again, just press it with your fingers to get roughly the fold and then crisp it all up. Now, if you were folding your length into 5 because of the size of pages you want, obviously you wouldn't fold it in half because you'd end up with a fold in the wrong place. Therefore, each of these folds needs to be divided into 3, like that. Then I'm going to bring the page over to that mark, do my rough fold there. So the reason, can you see that it's struggling to fold like that, is just because of the grain of the paper. If you don't know, paper actually has a grain and it will fold far more easily if I was folding it lengthways, this just because of how this paper is. But for ease of making this book and getting as long a strip as possible, then I needed to use it this way. Just going to mark my width again, which we know was 5.5 and 11. As you get going, you can actually just line up different parts of the paper to get the right size. The thicker your paper, the harder it will be to fold, and you need to go over those folds really carefully to make sure that they're all nice and crisp and it's lining up. So say if you've restricted for your working place, do these foldings before you stick the whole lot together. Otherwise, it can be a little bit like wrestling with an octopus. Line up corners and edges to get things as straight as possible, and your final book will reward you. So at the end of that folding process, you should have a stack something like that. What I would do is actually go through all the folds and put them the other way as well, if your paper is quite thick, and we can put that to one side now. Let's do the covers. I always love doing the covers. So our cover needs to be slightly bigger than a pages, because the point of the cover is to protect the edges of the pages. Oh, that will just about do. So my pages are just under 8 inches, and yeah, we will just about get away with that. What I think I'll do is cut this cover first and then make sure this one is identical. My measurements quite often go totally awry. Again, just use your cutting board if you've got one, protect your table. Make sure you use a really sharp knife If you've got one of these, just break off the end so you're using an absolute fresh tip, because it will be surprising how quickly everything blunts. And just do multiple cuts to get through nice and cleanly. So that's one, and then I'll use that just to measure what I've got to cut off. This one, measure, 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 double check, yep, that you've not done anything silly. It's just easy when you're making things just to make a simple mistake and things not to fit. So just double check everything as you go along, that it's all making sense. If you haven't got the back of an old sketchbook, then you could use maybe old cover of a book, or a bit of mount board, a little bit of hardboard. I think it's worth having a hard cover because you're going to be sketching on the go and you want something to support it. Got my map of the Caribbean, so I want lots of South America, the Gulf of Mexico, a bit of North America. I'm just going to draw around it gently in pencil to double check. I'm then going to cut, leaving about an inch extra. Now, what might be good is actually to score round there as well, because one, that will make it easier to fold, but also hopefully that will show through the other side, just about line up with sticking. I'm not trimming the corners yet until I've stuck the board on. So same glue, and I'm going to be very generous with this. If you were using a very thin cover paper, well, one, I wouldn't, because it will get damaged. You're going to be rough with this, you're traveling with it, it's going to be in and out of your bag. But just be careful of the glue, because if it was a very thin paper, as soon as it gets wet, it'll become fragile. Let's get a clean sheet so we don't get glue. What we don't want to do is get glue on the front, do we? So let's line it up, move it down. Just double check. No air bubbles, no wrinkles. Smooth it down. Again, you could use the edge of your bone folder if you've got it, or just use your hands. Now we know exactly where it is, we can trim the corners. Do not trim right to the cardboard. That's just so that we've got enough to overlap and encase the corners fully. Let's start with a long side, and we glue along there, being careful not to get the glue on the front cover. Fold it over. And what's quite nice, if your board is quite thick, is to actually roll it over so that you get that nice rounded smooth corner. Doing the other long side opposite, I can fold it over like that, press that down. Let's get on a clean sheet. Just make sure that's all nicely done. Now, this is the secret of getting good corners. Use your thumbnail and just pinch in at the bottom there. Press it down, pinch it in, pinch it in. Now we're gluing again. Careful not to get it on the front. And we're folding it over, and we have totally encased those corners, and we have one cover. That needs to dry. What I like to do I've got the inside of a cereal packet, which is great non-stick paper. Lay it on there, and I can just weight it down under a book to dry. And we do exactly the same with the back. Now this one, I've got Barbados down here and Barbados there. So that's the bit that I want to be on my cover. Flip it over, pop it in place, line everything up, firm it down, trim those corners, remembering not to get too close to the corners. I've got a smaller overlap on this one just because of how everything was on the page. Again, this is the bit that's important, nipping it in with your thumbnail to make sure you get really neat little corners. How's that looking? And then again, that can be added to my little pile. And the reason for the non-stick paper is just in case there's any excess glue, so it doesn't stick to the books that you're weighting it down with. And those need to dry, ideally for a couple of hours, so that they don't warp. Let's make the expandable pocket. Now, a lot of people make the pocket totally separately and then stick it in. If you're using quite thick paper, that adds a lot of bulk to the back of the sketchbook, which I don't like. So I am going to try something new. This may or may not work. I want it to be the same size as the book. Doesn't look the squarest thing. That is probably down to my incompetence. So let's just measure. It's better that it's slightly smaller than too big. Now I need to fold over the top, which will strengthen the top. So I need some extra there. I'm just going to judge that by eye. And we need to stick in the bottom. So I need some extra there. We're talking maybe 3/4 of an inch, 1.5 centimeters. At the edges, we have to have 3 folds. So again, I'm going to do that as 1.5 centimeters. So 3 times 1.5 centimeters is 4.5 centimeters. If you want your pocket to be deeper than that, really big pocket, you would need to add extra at the side. And now we need to cut out along our guidelines, and the shape will become a lot clearer once it's cut out, and I'll show you that, don't worry. So it's almost like a cross shape, but obviously a very fat one. This is the size that you want the pocket to be in your book. This top is a flap to reinforce the top. This flap will be folded under to reinforce the bottom. These bits will be concertinaed to make the extendable sides. So let us fold to start with. We'll fold that top flap in. Because it's a lot thinner paper, I'm just using my fingernails to make sure that's a nice crisp fold. And we're folding that bottom flap in. What we want to do is just slightly miter these corners. Just take off a small amount here. Then we need to fold along the line that we drew, that gives us the size of our pocket. With these corner bits, we actually need to do a couple more folds, each on the 1.5 centimeter line. So that flap goes behind the pocket. Then you want to fold it forward. Then you want to fold it backwards. And if that makes sense, this is going to be pinched, this is going to be stuck onto the paper behind, and that is your extending pocket. So that will be fixed at the bottom, but at the top it will be able to extend. 3 little pieces folded like that, and we need to do exactly the same to the other end. So let's fold over the top and glue that down now. So I've stuck the top edge, say that's just reinforcement. And what we can do if we want to is just put a little dot of glue there, and that'll just hold that in place, which will make it slightly easier when we come to stick it onto the cover. Isn't actually necessary, but just like that. So we are at the assembly stage, and I just need to double check it is folded in the right way, because we want a cover, and the cover actually needs to stick to that. So I haven't got it folded in the right way. And it is so easy just to concertina it the correct way. This is why I say just double check everything, keep checking so that you don't end up with anything wrong. Still checking that the joins are on the back side, and they are. Good, they're now tucked inside. I can stick my cover here, and then I will open straight onto that fold. Let's get the covers out so that makes that clear to you. Oh, right, covers are not dry. This is because I am an impatient person. So this cover, what I did first, is drier. I think we'll do that on the front, and we'll have that on the back. That will go like that. So we stick that there, that there, that there. Pocket is going in the back here. So we will lose the last page of the watercolour because we're going to put a pocket there. So that's my sandwich. This was what I was going to use for my enclosure, and we will need to stick that between the back cover, and it will come round and tie like that. So say that will go there, that will stick there, that will stick there, and then sadly losing that last bit, but putting in my expandable pocket. So let's find the centre of the ribbon, or whatever you're using. You could use a bit of string, you could use whatever you fancy. And we're going to put that in the middle there, just to keep that in place. You need to apply glue to the back page, not to the cover, because the cover is slightly bigger than the back page and you would apply too much glue. We just slip a piece of paper under there so we don't end up with glue all over the book. And we put that on. Take the paper out. We've got our ribbon in place. And then we centre the paper in the cover and press firmly in place. Make sure that ribbon doesn't move, doesn't get out of the way. Put a piece of paper under the front cover. Apply glue. Remember, corners always the bit that dries quickest. Take that out. Make sure it's the right way up and centre, and then press down. If we've done it right, they will line up, and if they don't, they won't. Before everything dries, just check that your enclosure is in the right place, hasn't shifted, that it actually is going to hold it closed. Yes, it is. A book. Now, usually I would let that dry, but I want to get this pocket on. So, pocket in the back cover. I am just questioning myself whether I want to make it a bit shorter so it's easier to use. I'd made it the same size as this piece of paper at the back, and I actually think it'd be better if it was a little bit shorter. So having carefully stuck those down, I'm going to unstick them and just fold that bottom flap up by eye. Trim that off. Just don't know these things until you do them, do you? Miter in those corners slightly. And then we have to apply glue there, there and there. Only on the flaps, because obviously if you put it on the pockets, it would be glued shut. And that would be a little unfortunate. And then we've gone on the back pocket. Making sure those all tucked in nicely and lined up. There we go. And you can see that's our little expandable flap. We are then going to close that up. I am going to wrap it, and I may actually put it inside there, just to make sure that doesn't stick to the back cover. And then I'm going to weight that down and let it dry really thoroughly. Everything's pretty much dry now, so let's have a look and see whether this has reached my definition of my perfect travel sketchbook. And of course I won't be able to tell you till after the holiday, but I've got my closure that I wanted, I've got my hard cover for resting on, I've got my decoration with where I'm going, so that's all cool. And inside we've got the concertina, which will let me work across 1, 2 or 3 spots. So I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the paper. That was that watercolour paper that I wanted. And then I've put my pocket in the back. Let's show that all worked really well. So I'll be able to put bits and bobs in there. It's gone a bit wrinkly when it got a bit damp as it was drying. But, well, gosh, the worst comes to the worst. I can actually iron that. Might iron my ribbon as well. So I think that's looking pretty spot on. One final thing I want to do is just get rid of some of the pencil marks from my measurements. And then it will be a case of deciding what is my perfect sketching kit. What will I use to paint in this book? And after the holiday, I'll show you the sketch and see whether it did actually deliver on its promise.